There's a guarded blueprint only top-level artists know. A secret I found in a letter Van Gogh sent to his brother Theo. It describes a balance so powerful it turned him into one of the most famous artists ever. And the way I discovered it all started in the library with a coloring book for children. So I'm in the library, I'm researching everything I can get my hands on, every artist biography, every business book, every case study imaginable. And at the time, money is running out. My mom is losing faith in her only son. I have about 6 months left to make this career work. Anyway, I'm researching, and as I'm researching, these top-level secret societies keep on popping up. The Blauwe Reiter, Lena B, the Venus Succession, and I feel like I'm very close. I feel like I'm almost going to blow up. I just need that final piece of information. But then months would go by. I wouldn't execute on any of the information. I didn't start my business. I didn't start making any money. I started to feel extremely lost because nothing was happening. And I started to be frustrated, thinking about perhaps I should just quit and do a regular job because this is clearly not working out. And one of the librarians notices my despair and she comes over and says, I have this book for you. It's going to teach you everything you need to know about business. I take the book and take a look and I see it's a coloring book for children. And on one hand, I'm thinking, what is a coloring book for children going to teach me about business? What is a librarian going to teach me about business? Did I miss the memo about Winsor & Newton's impact on Wall Street? On the other hand, I'm also very curious because it's a coloring book for children. By the way, a couple of weeks later, I find out that this librarian isn't actually a librarian. She is a business lady that developed several multi-million-dollar businesses, retired, and now volunteers in the library sometimes because she loves books. Anyway, I opened the coloring book and I will never forget the words on the first page. They read, "Dreams can be read. They must be lived. In order to begin, pick up a crayon." And I immediately realized, wow, I've been wasting my time dreaming in libraries. I haven't done anything. I haven't even started my business. I haven't even picked up that crayon. Thinking is not doing. Reading is not doing. And doing is the only way to actually get something done. Wow, surprise. And so the question becomes, how can we stop wasting our time watching YouTube videos for 3 hours a day and then not execute on them? How can we make sure that we don't make the mistake that I was making in that library? And I found the answer hidden in a letter Van Gogh sent to his brother Theo. And based on what I found in that letter, I created an execution quick start checklist with 70 3-second quick start tips that you can use to never fall for this trap again. I'll share it at the end of the video for free. For now, let's go over the 70-20-10 rule that is the perfect foundation for this Van Gogh secret. So the 70-20-10 rule is a research rule that states that you should divide your research according to this balance. 10% learning from books from traditional sources, 20% learning, researching through interacting with other human beings within your niche. So in our case, that's just other artists or gallerists or collectors or people like that. And then for the 70%, you are going to do research by doing things in the marketplace, executing on what you've learned, and then reviewing that as your form of research. Now, the 10% thing, everybody obviously understands that. The 20% thing is very peculiar. Why would you want to do that? Do we have proof that this works? Do we know that 20% of your time putting in learning from other human beings, other artists, that actually works? Well, if you look at the history books, if you look at the artists that you admire, every single one of them did that. They all did that. The Venus Succession, for example, founded by Gustav Klimt, or the Blue Riders, founded by Wassily Kandinsky, or something you're very familiar with, the Impressionists with Renoir, Monet, Degas, painters like that. And so what are these groups? What are these people? Well, these are nothing more than groups of artists that come together to learn from each other. And why is this so powerful? Why does this work so well? Well, if you are going to execute in the marketplace, let's say that 70% time you're doing things in the marketplace, you're getting feedback, you're learning from that. Well, you are learning at the speed of your ability to make mistakes, the ability of one person to make mistakes. Now, if you do the same thing with 10 other artists or 9 other artists, so in total you have 10 artists, now you are not learning from your mistakes only, you are learning from all of those mistakes combined, and so you're learning 10 times faster. That's why this 20% time is so powerful, so important, and that's why we see it among all artists that we admire. Now, I do this all of the time myself. For example, on YouTube, I have a WhatsApp group where I have other YouTubers, and then we share information, mistakes, failures that we've made, things we learned, and then we help each other out. And so this is definitely something you should do in your art career, whatever you do, whether it's YouTube, Instagram, just anything, from your marketing all the way to your artist creation. Now, it is very hard to find a group like this, and I've actually thought about it myself. I've actually thought about creating such a group, creating some kind of movement like the Winning Succession or the Blue Riders or anything like that online. Let me know what you think about that in the comment section if you would be interested in joining such a group. By the way, this idea of learning from your peers, learning from other artists, Van Gogh also talks about this a lot in his letters. He talks about visiting other artists, visiting ministers, visiting people within the industry that he can learn from constantly. And in his letters, he literally talks about it not being just for camaraderie purposes, but actually for growing together, becoming better together. And so that's very powerful. Now, when it comes to the 70% doing part, why in God's name would you step into the marketplace and start doing when you don't know what to do yet? Isn't it better to do research? Well, Van Gogh actually had a lot to say about it. At one point he said, if you find yourself listening to a voice within you that you cannot paint, then by all means paint, and that voice will be silenced. Something in those lines. What is he saying there? Well, he's literally saying that the remedy for thinking, the remedy for overthinking, for doing research, for being paralyzed, like I was in that library, is in the doing itself. In another letter he writes, by working and doing, one grows into the work and the doing of it. Now, what does he mean there? What is he saying there? He's obviously not saying by researching and thinking and reading we grow into the work of doing it. No, he's talking about doing itself being the way to do the thing, which is so simple, yet the only thing that is actually necessary. Thinking is not doing, learning is not doing, researching is not doing, and doing is the only way to actually achieve those dreams that we have. And so prioritizing that doing with 70% of your time is just a solution. Now, does this mean that every single beginner and every person on every point of their trajectory in their career should follow the exact balance, 70, 20, 10? Of course not. I do believe that all the way in the beginning, if you're a complete beginner, you just started out for a couple of weeks, perhaps that balance might be 60, 20, 20. Perhaps 20% more studying in books or from YouTube videos is advisable and can be very beneficial. Perhaps even more, perhaps 50, 20, 30, I don't know. But at some point, you want to go down to a place as quickly as possible where you can do things and almost only do things together with other people or on your own 70% of the time, 20% of the time. So how are we going to implement this 70-20-10 rule? I would start my day doing research on YouTube. Now, the problem with YouTube is that it is way too addictive. They've designed it in such a powerful way that if you start your day doing a 10% research session of, let's say, 1 hour, you end up regretting it 5 hours later because you've been watching for 5 hours straight. And what does it mean to watch YouTube 5 hours straight? Well, it means that you've wasted your time. You've wasted years of your life if you do this for 60 years. Let's do the math. Let's calculate how much time we would actually waste if, let's say, we would be researching 2 hours a day too much. So let's assume that we are going to live for another 60 years because, let's face it, the science around longevity is only increasing, and so we're probably going to live to, I don't know, 100, 110, 120. Let's assume that's 60 years, okay? So 2 hours a day for 60 years. That's 2 multiplied by 365 multiplied by 60 to get 43,000 hours, 800. Let's divide it by 16 hours. We are awake for 16 hours because we're sleeping 16 hours, and so then we get the amount of days, the amount of waking days that this would be equal to. So that's 2,737.5 days divided by 365 to get the amount of years. That will be 7.5 years. If we waste 2 hours a day watching YouTube or doing any excess research, then that would equal to 7.5 years. And so 7.5 years, what does that mean? Well, in 7.5 years, you could travel the world twice and still have 3 years left in change. That's what it means. 3 years. What's 3 years? Well, 3 years is 5,840. Well, if it is true that it takes 10,000 hours to master a particular skill, then in those 2 years you would be able to do 50% of that mastering. You would become almost an oil painting master just with that rest over time. Let alone if you would have used 7.5 years to master your oil painting skill while you get it, you would be an absolute badass, non-stoppable force of nature. And so how do we solve this entire problem? Well, we have to time our sections properly. I would always start my day with 70% time to doing, and then I would implement the 20% and 10% all the way at the end of the day, so that when for some reason you start to go in over excessive mode on any of those two things, it's going to be blocked by the fact that you have to sleep and stop your day. And so the rule that you want to follow is the create before you consume rule. Always create first, always do first, and then consume and do your research. Now, why is this 70-20-10 rule so powerful? Why do we see this in every single art success story from the past, and not just art success stories? The great thinkers of the past, the great business people of the past, they all follow similar structures to this 70-20-10 rule. So why is this so powerful? Well, recently I came across this study that absolutely blew my mind away completely. Paul Slovic, a peer of Nobel laureate Daniel Kahneman, did the following thing. So he asked a couple of horse ride gamblers to gamble on a series of horses. And he told them that they would gamble in 4 rounds. In the first round, they would get 5 pieces of information of their choice. And so some of them might choose, for example, the age of the horse, or the age of the rider, or how many experience they have with the horse, whatever they needed. And then he asked them to not only pick the winners, but also estimate how confident they were in their bets. Now, in each round, there were 10 horse races. And so by sheer chance, they would have 1 out of 10 chance and have an accuracy level of 10% and a confidence level of 10%. Now, with the 5 pieces of information, they had an accuracy level of 70%. Now, these were professional gamblers. They knew what they were doing. So 17% is higher than 10%. Great. And their confidence level was 19%, so very close to 17%. Again, these are professional gamblers. Now, in the second round, they got 10 pieces of information. In the third round, they got 20 pieces of information. And in the fourth round, they got 40 pieces of information. Now, here's the interesting thing. As the round went on, their accuracy levels remained the same, around 17%. But their confidence levels grew all the way up to 34% in the fourth round. So what does this mean? Well, their accuracy levels remained the same, their confidence levels went up. And so in the real world, the more information they would have gotten, the more money they would have put on those bets, and the more money they would have possibly lost because their confidence levels went up. And so there are diminishing returns when it comes to getting information. The more information you get, the more confident you become. What does that mean if your accuracy level stays the same? The reality is that beyond the minimum amount of information, your accuracy levels simply will not increase. The reality is that the world is simply too complex to understand. If we get more information, we can't actually do anything with that. And so what does that result in? Well, it results in information paralysis, where too much information kind of blocks our decision making because there's just too much choice, and now we're not doing anything. Now we're over researching everything and just blocking ourselves. Or it results in a confirmation bias, where we take the new information and then we use it to support the old beliefs that we already had, or conveniently push it away because it does not go in line with what we already believed in, and so hence it's not important. Now, if we accept the thesis of this video, namely that doing too much research and having too much information is detrimental, then what does that look like? How do we implement that in a practical way? Well, here's one of the things that artists will do. They will look at their art, practice on their art, trying to improve. And in order to improve it, they will come up with a list of things, a list of mistakes, a list of things that they have to improve. That's information overload. That's way too much information. What are you going to do now? Now you have to decide which of the 15 mistakes you've made is the most important one, then start executing on that one with way too much it doesn't work like that. What you should do instead, or what I find works better for me at least, is to take one thing that you know you should improve and then improve on that one thing. And then after you've done that, do that again. And so that's a very simple way to implement this. You can do this for any art form, not just painting, music, whatever you need. Now, there's another one. that is way more profound, that is way more powerful. I was kind of a little bit, I shouldn't say that, but to some extent proud when I was preparing for this video, because it describes such a disease in the art world, and it's so essential and it's so foundational, and I see nobody talking about it. Here's what happens. One of the mistakes that artists are making is that they are practicing their art too much. They are focusing on improving their skill level way too much. Here's what happens. If you improve your skill level, if you improve your art constantly and only, then you will become extremely confident about your art and the ability that your art has, because it's the only thing that you have, it's the only thing that you focus on, it's the only piece of information that you get, and you get way too much of information on that front. And so what is going to happen? Well, you are going to become so confident in the ability for your art to sell itself that you are not going to focus on the sales part. You are not going to invest time in the business side. You are not going to invest time in learning how to make money from your practice. And so what is going to happen? Well, you're basically going to starve for the next 2 decades to come. And I see this with artists all over the place. They are so confident in the idea that art should be able to sell itself because that's the only thing they've done, and they're poor as fuck. I see a lot of artists who have extremely high skill levels, way higher skill levels than me, and they would be very disappointed if they would compare their bank account to my bank account. And here's the thing, a higher skill level in the art doesn't necessarily translate to actual quality art. I see a lot of people, a lot of artists with a high skill level and very low quality art, and then other artists with a low skill level but high quality art. And so the whole idea of practicing on your art is such an overrated idea. There are almost no benefits to it. And it's very counterintuitive. It's very provocative to think in that way, but I do believe that there's a balance that should be met, and not every artist should achieve the highest of its skill level possibilities. That's just not necessary. Just like not every man should achieve the most amount of muscles that he should possibly be able to get. You know what? At some point, having more muscles is just not going to be beneficial. Now, who are these artists that I'm talking about? These artists with their low levels of skill but extremely high quality art. These artists that clearly did not practice all of the time but reached massive successes, wrote history, and just rose to the top. Well, a great example, a very famous example, is Basquiat. Basquiat, his artwork is not of a crazy high skill level, but it's amazing. This neo-expressionistic, very raw nature in his art, the text on top of it, the societal criticism, the whole thing makes sense. The whole thing works tremendously well. Another great example is Tracy Emin. If you look at her preliminary drawings, her early drawings, where she's kind of expressing that trauma, that sexual trauma, these drawings are perhaps first grade level skill, but the quality is so high. It resonates so much with who she is, with her identity. And if you look at the art and you look at the identity and you look at the art, it just makes sense. And it's amazing, but a very low skill level. She did not practice drawing all of the time. Now, is this something we only see among artists? No, of course not. We see this across the board. Gallerists, collectors, they are all falling for the same traps. They are all falling for the confirmation bias. And so what happens with these gallerists? What happens with these collectors? Well, they will follow the traditional path. They will study about the traditional path. And as they are studying about it, they become overconfident about the traditional path. And so every new piece of information that comes in, they just either use it to support the traditional path or they conveniently neglect it. And so what does that mean? Well, it means that when YouTube comes along, these gallerists, these collectors are looking at YouTube and they think by themselves, well, that's just not for us. That's not an opportunity. That's not going to go that far. And so are they accurate in their judgment there? Well, if we look at the gallery report of Magnus Resch, I think it's 2017 or 2019 or something, they analyzed the galleries. 55% of galleries are making less than 200k in revenue a year with 0 to 2 employees. So 2 employees, 200k in revenue, they have to pay those employees. And then they also have to pay those artists that they are representing. And so how much profit are these 55% of galleries making? 30k, 40k, 50k? I mean, not that much. They are absolutely not making a lot of profit. And those are the things that we are putting on a pedestal. Those are the things that we are celebrating. Those are the things that we are admiring. And the reality of YouTube, for example, is that YouTubers, YouTube artists are reaching 1,000 times more people, 500 times more people? How many people are going to these openings of these gallerists? 60, 70, 80? How many people are watching these YouTube videos? Thousands and thousands. And so that's kind of a very strange thing in and of itself. Now, if we look at the revenue that these YouTubers are making, these social media artists are making, they are making way more. In AdSense alone, some of them are making more than the entire revenue of these galleries. And so that's a very interesting thing to look at, because that's just AdSense. That's not sponsorships that's taken into account. That's not art sales that's taken into account. That's not the businesses that they are developing on top of YouTube that is being taken into account. And so what does all of this mean? Well, it means that we artists, we should not only look at our own confirmation biases, we should also look into the market, look at the gallerists. Which confirmation biases do they have? Which confirmation biases do these collectors have? Which confirmation biases do the audiences have? And then we should try to see the gaps in the market and then put our time and effort in those gaps perhaps. And so a question we can ask ourselves is, how many of these gallerists have YouTube channels? And the answer I came across is kind of one. The only thing that I can think of is Contemporary Art Issue. That's it. There are no other gallerists on YouTube. And that's a very strange thing. For some reason, they believe that solo exhibitions in their little shops on the street is a great idea. But making a video that will reach 1,000 times more people, that's absolutely terrible. Now, as promised, here's a quick start execution hack list. Don't try all of them, just pick a couple that resonate with you. If you want a full list with over 70 hacks, you will have to click the link in the description. But be careful, 2% of people that click that link will receive a virus that destroys their entire computer. That said, this entire video will be absolutely worthless if you do not figure out what to do with that 70% time. How you can actually sell your art, how you can actually make money from your art, how you can actually thrive in this art business. And all of that starts with figuring out what the best place is to sell your art. I've made a video called Best Place to Sell Your Art, Selling Art Fast, link in the description and in the end screen. That said, get the hell out of here.